There are hopes and treasures beyond your broken wing. There are hopes and treasures beyond your broken wing.
When somebody comes through the door for the first time, not for the preliminary interview, but to see the house, but the first time at group night.
Yeah.
Now I know I had, I think 11 people sign up for the group I'm in now,
Yeah.
and we had 6. Is that common?
I think on average we have about, like, say 10, that's the average number. And on the very first night, you can have usually about, it varies, sometimes 2 less than the 10, sometimes it's the whole group. So it really varies, and the last one, maybe it was the weather this time, I don't know. But on average, I would say we have 80 to 100% capacity when the groups are happening on the first night. And of course, the first night for a group is indeed the scariest night. And as an example, I often use this one example. Most of the time, well, not most of the time, all of the time, when people come up for that first group night, not the intake as you're saying, Deb, but the very first night that they know they're going to be talking to them. So the people, the apprehension level is really high. That's why the facilitators, such as yourselves, are so vital to making that invitation for people to come into the group. Well, one night, a fellow came here on opening night for him, pulled up in his truck, walked up the steps to the door, turned around, walked down the steps, got in his truck, drove to a park and pulled a gun out and said to himself, I just can't do this. As he did this, there were some people, he told the story, and there were kids and families just walking by in the park. And it so happened he had 2 children. And when he saw these kids walking by with their family down at the park, he put the gun back, and he had the gun in his glove compartment because he was in a pretty bad place, obviously, and came to the house, and his whole life turned around in a really amazing way. So that first night, that really is really a scary night.
It's scary. It takes a lot of courage
Yeah.
to come through the door when you've been silent.
Yeah,
for so long.
For decades, right?
Yeah, you always talk about the voice, regaining your voice, and that is huge. That's powerful because, you know, why is it that people don't talk about the sexual violations that they experience as children?
Yeah.
Why do we?
I know, it's a really amazing thing, and that's one of the, I think we still have a lot of exploration to do around that we keep stifling everybody's voice, whether it's the child's voice by way of coercion or threats or whatever way it happens, shame and guilt that you mentioned that earlier. Just culturally, we still don't accept the fact that we do these things to children at an incredibly high rate in our culture. And so there's this percolation of shame and guilt culturally, socially, that stops people from coming forward to talk. And I think until we get to a place where we really, really in our hearts focus on relational scenarios, how do we build healthy relationships with our children out, all the way from there out, how do we do that? We're going to find ourselves still getting ourselves into these difficulties of stifling people's voices. So we've got an awful long way to go. Yeah.
We do. We have a long way to go. That's why, I mean, there's so many different aspects that you can deal with in this whole area, right? There are people that are doing the educational piece, and there's some people that are doing the punishment piece, going after offenders, and you know, and there's so many. But I want to focus on healing for myself because I just find that one, it's about the person who's being affected, and I feel like that's the change that I want to make. But there's so many people doing so much good work.
I think in that whole piece, the one thing that we have a conference now that our 4th annual conference is coming up, and it's grown from sitting in a room talking over a cup of coffee with a couple of people thinking maybe 10 people will show up to this year we'll probably have over 150 to 160 people, and they're coming from around the world. So that's pretty amazing. And one of the things that we're going to talk about this upcoming conference is the idea of transformative justice. In that, going back to why people don't come forward to talk, I believe we live in a retributive culture overall when it comes to many, many things, certainly including the offense harming, sexually assaulting children. So if we always approach the helping of a person who's been harmed within a retributive framework, I think it makes it, that's a good thing to get going, to help a person, you can help them. But the retributive aspect of it scares people. It frightens people. It keeps their anger going. And what we have to do, and I can speak to that some, I know we don't have enough time today, but about that down the road. But if we went at it from a transformative state, where we say we're not into trying to find out how to lay guilt or blame on anybody, that's really not what we're going to do here. What we're really going to do is find ways for your voice to come out and for you to get strong. That's just going to be the focus. And in that process, however, there may be processes where the person who did the offending behavior, for their voice to come out and their understanding of how did they get to be the person that would do this? How did you get there? If we could find that out, then maybe we could be more preventative, more powerful in our approaches, so that we could deal with this in a way that diminishes it, where it's really honestly dealt with in a healthy way. But we don't do that, and so that's something we have to work on.
It's difficult to talk about it because when somebody's gone through this and they've suffered for years, it's the punishment. It's the punishment model. Like you want to stop that. So it's hard to say, let's sort of help or find out about the.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I believe. Yeah. Listen, I believe. We talk all the time about this. How do we stop sexual abuse? And can it be stopped? And what do we have to do? Well, the only way it can be stopped is if we find the reason why people are violating other people. Yeah. And yes, there are people that put them away and lock them up. Yeah. But there are other layers of that we have to really walk really delicately to address it. But it needs to be addressed, because think about if we can tap into a younger person who's starting to have these types of feelings, maybe with a sibling, right, or with a friend. If we can get to that person and educate that young person about what healthy behavior looks like.
And we just don't do that. Pardon me, we just don't do that. We don't focus on healthy behavior. We tend to put behaviors in extremes. We sensationalize behavior, we idealize certain forms of behavior, and we don't really give healthy attention to just that positive, supporting, nurturing, transformative behavior. It's very different from that, and so I think that's something we've really got to. At some point, we're going to talk about at this conference. It's going to be really controversial, I'm sure.
It will be, because there are people, when we talk about forgiveness, we talk about a lot of different things at the Gatehouse, right? You talk about relationships and boundaries and anger, and forgiveness is a huge one. But often the person needs to forgive themselves for whatever reason first. But when we talk about forgiveness, about the perpetrator, or sometimes perpetrators, wow,
that's pretty massive.
It is, and understandably.
Absolutely
because
understandably.
Some of these people have violated hundreds of children.
Yeah.
There are hopes and treasures beyond your broken wing. There are hopes and treasures beyond your broken wing. Ooh, beyond your broad